physical copy, that's what I need you to be following. And I'll also send out an email. Outside, the sky is blue. The person that are facial expression communication process test. Some of you would probably. Hi there, welcome to Oral Communications with Mr. Gamble in room 127. And this is going to be our first video of the semester, and we're just going to walk you through the expectations and the rules that we're going to follow. These expectations will be the same whether you're sitting here in class or whether you are at home learning virtually, okay? So, to start out the day, we are going to have bell ringers that you will complete. If it doesn't matter where you're at, you are going to create a Google document. It'll look a little bit different if you're using a laptop or a computer, but it's going to be about the same. You're going to open up your Google documents, you're going to create a new document, then you're going to label it. If you're an oral comm, I need you to put OC dash bellringer dash class period. Obviously, if you're in theater or debate, you would change OC to whichever class period you're a part of. And then you are going to make sure that you put down the date that you are actually going to be writing about, and you're going to keep the entire list of bell ringers all on one document. So that's how we're going to do our bell ringers. And in that Google document, you are going to keep track of your bell ringers each day. And so you're going to have to do a couple of things. Number one, you're going to have to label it with the date, and then you're going to have to write out the bell ringer in complete sentences. So it's not going to be just like one word or two words. You're going to have to actually answer the questions in complete sentences. So the example up on the board is 3 parts. When you walk in, the bell ringer could be all 3. It could be one of the 3, but you need to expect to do some of these different types of things, okay? So you'll either have definitions, which you'll see later on in worksheets, in tests, and as we discuss them. You can also see quiz questions. So this is going to be a word-for-word question that you will see on a quiz at a later date. And not only will we go over the question, but we will also go over the answer. And so there should not be any sort of surprise when it comes to how you're going to be tested, how you're going to be evaluated, because you'll see a lot of those questions when we actually are doing our bell ringers. Next up is a quote of the day, and as you can see for today's, there's not going to be a quote, and we'll talk about those a little bit more later on. But let's go ahead and jump right into the bell ringer for today. So we start off with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 definitions. On most days, it'll probably just be 1 or 2 definitions, but I'm going to need you to know these in order for us to discuss communication a little bit more in depth starting tomorrow. So looking at our first definition, it's going to be the Johari window. And so the Johari window is going to be something that we study. And the definition itself is that it's a model of self-awareness, personal development, group development, and understanding relationships. And it's a 4-part diagram where you self-evaluate how you communicate with people. And so in one instance, there are places of your life where you're completely open to the world. So if you look at the bookcase behind me, you'll see that I am, without apology, a big nerd. And so I don't mind sharing that part of my life with people, right? It's going to be a place where I open up to the entire world. And so you can see Dungeons and Dragons, you can see Harry Potter, you can see Marvel Comics, you can see Star Wars, different things like that. And so that's something that I'm not afraid to share with the entire world. And so that would be a part of the Johari window. Now, you know, there are some people that have big bad secrets. So they go home and then they watch things like My Little Pony. And so you don't want the world to know that you watched My Little Pony. And so you keep your brony persona secret from the rest of the world. And so there are parts of our life that we like to keep secret, that we don't show anybody else. And then, of course, there's parts of our life that we don't know that we like these types of things. And so if you've never eaten shrimp, you wouldn't know whether or not you like shrimp or not. So that's going to be something that's completely hidden from you and from other people. And then the last window is going to be one where people know them about us, but we don't know about ourselves. So if you've ever known someone who's very loud and annoying, then you can, and they don't know it, they think that they're outgoing and friendly and everyone likes them, then that would be, a huge portion of that person's personality would be in that window where they don't know about that aspect of their life. And so there are different things that people have, that other people know about them that they don't know about themselves. And so ultimately, the goal of the class and the goal of learning about communications is to expand that open area so that you can become comfortable with yourself, but not only comfortable with yourself, comfortable sharing information and sharing parts of you with the world in a way that can be understood, in a way that makes sense. All right, and so that's what the Johari window is all about. Next is going to talk about academic honesty. And so I would hope that this is something that you're going to be learning at a lot about in your other classes as you start your high school career, because most of you are going to be ninth graders. But it's talking about performing all academic work in a responsible and ethical manner. So that also includes turning your work in on time. And specifically for the people that are working at home, you're not going to get days and days extra to get the work done, because we're expecting you to follow along just as if you're sitting here in class. And so part of being academically honest is making sure that you do your work and that you get it turned in a timely manner. And if you're sitting here in class, the same holds true for you. Of course, I have 5 kids. I know that life comes at you hard and fast, and sometimes there might be a problem. You can come talk to me about those things. But that, again, comes along with academic honesty, is being forthright and coming up and saying, so-and-so happened, can I have an extra day, can I have an extension? And that's going to be part of academic honesty. But it also includes acknowledging any source of information that's not common knowledge and completing academic work without cheating. And so this is a big one every single year. That involves going to Wikipedia and highlighting your source information and not giving any citations. That involves you talking to someone and typing down exactly what they say and not telling us that the information came from that person. This involves you getting information from books and not giving them credit, taking information off of documentaries or movies. Anything like that is going to be considered academic dishonesty and plagiarism, and we want to avoid that. For the people that are virtual learners, but also for the people that are sitting here in class, you're going to have a very, very strong urge to cheat this year, because much of your work is going to be done online. Much of your work is going to be digital, and it's going to be really, really easy for you to try to do a test or a quiz or a worksheet for one of your friends. But that is academic dishonesty, and there's going to be multiple problems with that if you're caught, and you will be caught eventually if you're not caught the first time. Number one, you're going to get a 0 for the assignment, and it doesn't matter if it's a test, if it doesn't matter if it's worth 200 or 300 points, you will get a 0 and you will not get to make up that 0. And that can quickly plummet your grade. The second thing that's going to happen is, on the movies, they make it seem like you have this this file that follows you around high school, and you don't have a file. You don't have a permanent record. You don't have a file. You don't have a permanent record. But what you do have is your reputation, and your reputation starts today on day 1, and it follows you all the way through to the day that you graduate. And if you are found out to be a cheater, then that's something that the other teachers are going to know about you as the years go on. And so they're going to look at you with that distrustful eye. And that's not something that anybody wants. Nobody wants to take away grades. Nobody wants for you to have this burden on your shoulders. And so it's best if you're academically honest as you go throughout your career, and specifically in this class. Also, you don't want to lie, you don't want to steal, you don't want to share information without authorization. So that's very, very important. Next is communication. The whole reason why you're in this class. Communication is the process of sending and receiving messages. And so, if you know Miss Gamble, she probably thinks that communication is more about sending the message because she doesn't spend a whole lot of time listening. But she's sitting right here. But half of communication is actually receiving. And so I've taught for 13 years. And over the 13 years, people come into this class with the preconception that communication is learning all about how they need to talk and how they need to talk well. And while that is something that we do spend a lot of time on, a big portion of communication, half of communication, is going to be the reception of sound, the reception of messages, and how to reply to those, but also how to receive them in the most unbiased and ethical way possible. And so it's important that as we discuss communication, you realize it's a two-part street. I've heard a lot of kids come in and say, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, they're just really, really bad teachers because obviously I don't know what's going on, and they just keep droning on and on and on and on. But part of the problem is we have a responsibility as a audience to speak up and to say, hey, I'm not understanding this. I'm not getting that. Can you repeat that? Can you give me a different way to understand that? And if we're not doing that, we can't blame the person who's speaking because they can't look into our mind. They can't break open our head and look at our thoughts and know that we don't understand. And a lot of times our nonverbals are going to be a lot more subtle than we think they are. And so while we might think that we're sending off these signals that we don't understand or that we're bored, but in reality, you might just look like you're tired. You might just look like you are understanding, but you're just not, you're low energy. And so it is part of your job as a receiver to make sure that the sender understands that their message is getting across, okay? So that's gonna be a huge portion of this class. Next is symbol. Anything that stands for an idea and is used to communicate. So in this case, the symbols that we're going to discuss would be nonverbals. So what you do with your hands as you speak, our ability to use body language. Also, the written word. The written word is nothing but symbols. They don't necessarily mean anything until you attach meaning to them. So the word tree is a symbol. If I had raised you from birth and I told you that dogs were trees and trees were dogs, you wouldn't know anything differently because the word tree is a symbol for something that you find in nature. And so coming to that knowledge, it allows us to look at language a little bit differently and to know that our words matter because they stand for something in people's minds. And so while you might use a word and you think that it's innocuous or that it's harmless, it can actually cause real life harm to people, and it can make them feel bad, and it can lead to dangerous situations in some points. So symbols are powerful, and it's a reason why we have this class. Last is context. So the situation in which communication occurs. So context is important because you don't speak the same right here in front of Mr. Gamble as you do when you're walking down the hallway with your friends. I know because I sit at the door and I listen to what you're saying, and you don't say the same things in class that you do in the hallway. You don't speak with your youth pastor the same way that you would with your football coach. You don't speak with your football coach the same way that you do with your grandma. You don't speak in the same volume at a mass or a funeral as you would at a concert because context matters in terms of communication. And so we have to realize that the situation in which communication occurs is going to change pretty much everything that we do. It'll change how we dress, it'll change the volume that we use, it'll change the words that we choose, it'll change the formal or the informal tones of the word usage, and it's very, very important for you to understand about communication. All right, the quiz question. In order, what are the 5 parts of communication? So in order, what are the 5 parts of communication? On the days that we have a quiz question for the bell ringer, you're actually going to just write down the question, and one of the things that we do on the next day is to answer that question, okay? And if it were any other day and there was a quote, you would be in charge of writing that quote down, and then you would discuss the quote. In this instance, as we are not doing any paperwork in class, what I would want you to do is to write that quote down and then to type up your thoughts on the quote itself. And so then you can take a quick picture of the quote, you can email or attach that to the document, and then turn it in with your typed up beliefs about the quote. And we'll get a little bit more in depth with that tomorrow when we actually have a quote to go with. right, the Johari model, as you can see right here, has 4 different parts and 2 dimensions. And so as you saw in the opening, it's going to be divided into what other people know about you. As you can see in the diagram, other people know things about you, and then other people have aspects of you that are hidden from them. And so when you look at the different quadrants in the Johari model, it will fall into those 2 categories. And then also, up top, you have the things that are known by you. So known by yourself or not known by yourself, depending on which quadrant you find yourself in. And the important thing that you need to realize is that this entire Johari model, the entire box, is you. It includes everything that you don't know about yourself, but each box is not going to be equal. It's different sizes for different relationships based on what you share with those people. So some people were more comfortable sharing with than others, some people were not. So the first quadrant is known as the open quadrant. And this is the quadrant that is going to be what you show to the world. The next quadrant is the blind quadrant, and that's the things that we don't know about ourselves. And so the next one is going to be the hidden quadrant. Those are the things that we do know about ourselves, but that we keep hidden from other people. And then finally is the unknown quadrant, and that's the subconscious fears, thoughts, things that you don't know about yourself. So maybe you love shrimp, you just never have had shrimp, and so you don't know those. So altogether, these 4 quadrants are known as the Johari window or the Johari model, depending on wherever you're talking about. So the first one is the open quadrant, and it's called open because it involves a person's behavior, motivations, feelings, likes, dislikes, things like that. One example can be factual information about yourself. And so you might know that you're a loud person, and other people know that about you, obviously, because they have ears. It could also involve feelings, desires, and needs that you allow other people to know, and basically information that you allow other people to know about you. And like I said before, this can vary based on relationship. So one friend might know something about you that another friend doesn't. And so this is not static throughout your entire life. It will vary based from relationship to relationship, and that's okay. The next quadrant is the blind quadrant. And so you don't know this about yourself, but others do. So you might be a person who is frequently confused, but you're very confident that you don't make mistakes. And so something like that happened today, and whenever I made a mistake, whenever I was doing this assignment. And so in order to shrink that blind spot, which is what you want, because you want to know as much about yourself, that's the entire point of introspection and intrapersonal communication, is to ask people so they can tell you what's wrong. Also, you can understand that this is going to be completely subjective. So what people think that they know about you is just what their own personal opinion, and it's not necessarily fact. All right, then we go back over to the hidden. So it's hidden. We don't know that you like Power Rangers unless you tell us. And so if you told us, it would shrink that hidden area, and your open area would enlarge. And so one of the things that we see is that we really want to open up the open area and make it as big as possible, because that means that you know the most about yourself, but also others do as well. Taking into consideration, though, you want to make sure that you do that with people that you trust, because you don't want to open up to people who are untrustworthy, because they'll take that information and they'll use it to hurt you. And so if you are going to allow people to have information about yourself, you need to make sure that you can trust that person. Some people don't have an open area. You can go on their Instagram, you can go on their social media, and it's just an explosion of information. You know what they eat, you know where they've been, you know everything about them. And so just realize that your hidden areas are not so hidden when you're sharing everything on social media. And then finally is the unknown quadrant. And so the unknown quadrant is going to be something about yourself that you don't know and that others don't know either. And so how you might react in a given situation. So up until 4 weeks ago, 31 days, You didn't know, and neither did anyone else, what kind of self-confidence you might have in the middle of a quarantine, in the middle of an isolation based on a pandemic. And yet now, you still might not be aware of how you're acting, but the people around you do. And so if you ask them, then that would shrink that unknown spot. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So in order to expand the open spots, there's a couple of different things that you can do. And it involves better communication with yourself, but also better communication with other people. So disclosure can be healthy. If you look at some of the big shrinks, the mental health people of the day, then they say that the more open you are, the better off you're going to be. But common sense dictates that you don't want to know everything about somebody, and they don't want to know everything about you. So we definitely want to make sure that we are not oversharing, that we're not doing things that's going to hurt ourselves. So if you want to expand that open spot out to the side and shrink your blind spot, then you can ask for help. You can ask for feedback from people in your surrounding area. But again, you have to realize, just like I said earlier, it's going to be based off their own personal opinion. And so you don't want to take what they say as gospel. You don't want to take it as complete facts and change who you are based on the information that they tell you. Because what people see and what people hear is going to be colored or influenced by their own bias, but also based on how they feel that day, if they've been fed, if they had good sleep the night before. And so you want to make sure that you're not just taking what people say as 100% fact. You can also disclose. You can tell other people about yourself in order to shrink that hidden area. And so it would no longer be hidden. It would still instead be in the open. And so you can accept your secret. So you can say, yes, I like Power Rangers. I like My Little Pony. And I'm not afraid to say it. And so what that does is it allows people to know something about you that you used to keep hidden, and then you can kind of open your horizons in regards to that aspect of your life. And so, again, you want to make sure that you are taking other people's advice and that you're careful about who you share your secrets to, because not everyone is going to accept you because you like the Power Rangers. Not everyone is going to accept that you're a brony and that you like My Little Ponies. And so you want to think of yourself first before you're worried about creating this open area. And then finally, you can expand into the unknown region. And so the unknown region is going to be based on other people's observation of how you react in certain situations, like I explained just a second ago. And so you can put yourself in a situation, and then you can ask other people to observe you. And based on that observation, you can try to find things about yourself. You can also go into different aspects of the world and experience it and see what you think about yourself. And then, of course, that would be divided into things that then you know about yourself, but then things that other people know. And so you'd have to separate that knowledge out and figure out what's best for you. Okay? Ultimately, though, the entire point of the Johari model is for you to look at how you communicate with other people and look at what you communicate with other people. And we want to be our authentic self. And so, as you can see in the diagrams, that that's not always the case. Some people have a bigger open area. Those people are going to be a little bit more comfortable. Some people have a huge blind area because they think that they're a certain way when in reality that they're not. Some people are completely hidden, so we know very, very little bit about them. They are a closed book. And then some people just have experienced so little of life that the majority of the Johari window is unknown. And so as you grow up, as you have new experiences, as you do different things, read different books, watch movies, travel, get a job, then that unknown area will start to shrink, and others will know things about you, and you'll know things about yourself. And so you're supposed to take all this knowledge, you're supposed to self-reflect on it, and then you're supposed to try to make the best self possible out of all of that information. In the bell ringer, we talked about the 5 parts of communication, so we're going to go ahead and discuss that now. As you draw this in your notes that you're going to keep for yourself, label it the communication model, and the first aspect is going to be the sender. Thing you're going to need to know, the definition for sender is one that begins the communication process because they want another to understand their message. As you draw the communication model, the second part is going to be, of course, the message. And the definition of message is information that is exchanged, and it can be verbal or nonverbal. The third part of the most basic version of the communication model is going to be the receiver. So the sender sends a message to the receiver. The definition of receiver is one who receives or believes that they have received a message. The fourth aspect of communication that you're going to write down is that is known as feedback. Feedback is going to be the response of the receiver to the message that was sent by the sender. So the official definition is the observable response to another's message. The fifth part of the most basic communication model is going to be the thing that happens on the inside, the messy part, communication barriers and noise. And so the very first thing we're going to talk about is going to be noise. Noise is anything that interferes with a message, and it's usually temporary. There are two different types that we're going to talk about. Internal, which originates from and resides inside of a communicator, or external, that's which is a distraction in the channel or environment. So an example of noise on the inside would be you're hungry. External noise would be someone mowing the lawn outside. And then we have communication barriers. So a barrier is any obstacle that actually blocks communication. So while noise might drown it out or make it harder to communicate, a barrier is going to be something that stops it. So an internal example of a barrier is something that resides inside the communicator. An internal barrier might be a headache that makes it to where you can't hear anything because you have like a splitting migraine. External is that which exists in the channel or other components of the communication process. So an example of a communication barrier in a channel, which would be the way that you send your message, would be if you had a bad reception on a cell phone. That would be a communication barrier that stops the communication from taking place. All right, and your assignment is going to be that you will draw the communication model, and then you're going to present this in 2 days. You can either present it in class or you can video record it, send it to me, and then I'll play it for the class. Just as if you were a virtual student, we can watch it on video here in class. And here's an example of me drawing out a communication model how I want it. If you notice, I want a little bit more than stick figures, but it doesn't have to be fantastic, okay? All right, start off by drawing the sender, and I'm going to try and make a little boy robot. One thing that you need to include in your drawing is going to be the channel. So how are the messages being sent is how you want to view the channel. It can be sent over spoken word, it can be written, it can be via video radio, it can be any sort of way that you would send a message. A lot of times when people do this assignment, they draw in little cell phones to indicate that that is the channel. It's completely up to you. It's up to your imagination. And you might have missed it, but the message is love. He sent a heart message, he's in love, and I'm going to be trying to send that message to a little girl robot. And just like the sender had a channel, the receiver is going to use a channel to send her feedback. And so I drew her channel. I didn't label it, I should have labeled it. And her feedback is going to be that she loves him also. And then we're going to get into the communication barrier. And in this instance, it's going to be a low battery that's going to stop the feedback from getting back to the sender. So he will not know that she loves him also because her battery dies in the middle of her sending the feedback. And then the last thing I'm going to do is label. So I need to label sender, channel, message, receiver. I need to label that second channel, which I forgot to do, feedback, and then barrier. So there are going to be 7 things labeled on your communication model: sender, message, receiver, feedback, communication barrier or noise, and then you have to label and show the 2 channels. You have the rest of today to get this finished, and then you can do it tomorrow for homework should you not finish today. Either way, it's going to be presented on Wednesday. You have 2 options. Number 1, you can draw it and present it in class on Wednesday. Or number 2, you need a video, upload, and link it to Google Classroom before 11 p.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, so that I can play it in class on Wednesday. But either way, your presentation will occur in class, either virtually or in person, on Wednesday. And the final thing that we're going to do on day 1 is going to be talking about Google Classroom. So if you're in first period, the class code is 5EJUVFO. Again, it's 5EJUVFO. It's important that you get signed up for your individual Google Classroom, because this is going to be where we have our assignments assigned and where they are turned in all year long. It doesn't matter if you're virtual or if you are here in person. If you are in second period, your class code is M3KNJOP. M3KNJOP. One last time, M3KNJOP. Make sure that you get it written down. Make sure that you get signed up for the class. And if you are in my third period class, our third period code is going to be 2EPMZYK. 2EPMZYK. And then a third and final time, 2EPMZYK. And again, all assignments are going to be put on Google Classroom, and they're all going to be received on Google Classroom. There will not be any paperwork that's turned back into Mr. Gamble this year. And fifth period's code is 6V5LY3U. 6V5LY3U. And the third and final time, 6V5LY3U.